Most parents don't actually panic out loud. They don't say it in the lobby. They don't usually say it to their kid, but they feel it. You're watching a class or a tournament and you notice another child. They look sharper, more confident, more comfortable, and a quiet question sneaks in. Is my child behind? That question doesn't come from judgment. It comes from care, from wanting to make sure you're doing right by them. Here's the part most parents don't realize. That question is usually built on a misunderstanding of how growth actually works over time. Most of us judge progress in snapshots. One class, one season, one performance, instead of understanding the pattern that actually drives development. In this episode, I'm going to show you what the pattern actually looks like, why early comparisons are misleading, and how real progress quietly separates over years, not weeks. Once you see it, you'll start looking at your child's growth differently. And a lot of that pressure disappears. This is especially true in sports and training environments, in martial arts, because parents are surrounded by comparison. Same age, same class, same schedule, same opportunity. So when one kid looks ahead in that moment, it feels meaningful. It feels permanent. But most of the time, it isn't. Here's something that matters. Early differences often have very little to do with long-term outcomes. They're influenced by things like confidence, comfort, personality, even the kind of day a child is having. But when parents don't have a clear model for how growth unfolds over time, those early differences feel bigger than they are. And that's where anxiety creeps in. This episode isn't about telling you to push harder. It's not about telling you your child needs more. And it's definitely not about pointing out what anyone is doing wrong. This is about understanding the system. Because when you understand how growth actually behaves, a lot of that pressure disappears. You stop rushing, you stop comparing, and you start seeing progress differently. So before we talk about effort, before we talk about discipline, and before we talk about consistency, we need to talk about time. Because time is the part of the equation most parents underestimate. And once you see how it works, you can't unsee it. One of the biggest misconceptions parents have about progress is that kids start far apart. That some kids come in with a huge advantage and others are already behind. But in most training environments, especially martial arts, that's just not true. When two students start at the same time, they are taught the exact same things. We don't teach one student a different punch. We don't give one student an advanced kick while another gets the basics. They learn the same stance, the same punch, the same block, the same kick, side by side, day one. Early on, the gap between students is usually very small. Sometimes it's almost invisible. And when differences do show up, they're often explained by things like who's more comfortable in new environments, who's more willing to try without overthinking, who's more confident raising their hand, or who's just having a good day. Those things matter in the moment, but they don't decide the long-term outcome. This is where we as parents often get misled. We see confidence and assume ability. We see hesitation and assume struggle. But confidence and capability are not the same thing, especially early on. In the beginning, progress looks messy. Everyone is learning how to move, how to listen, how to coordinate their body, how to be coached. Those skills develop at different speeds, and that's normal. If you were to graph progress at this stage, the lines would be almost on top of each other. Same starting point, same general direction, very little separation, which is exactly why early comparisons are so misleading. There simply hasn't been enough time for real separation to happen yet. This is an important idea to sit with, because when parents believe the gap is bigger than it actually is, they feel pressure to rush, to add more, to push harder, to intervene early. But most of the time, nothing is wrong. The system just hasn't had enough time to work yet. And this is where understanding growth over time becomes incredibly important, because the real separation doesn't happen at the beginning. It happens later, quietly, gradually, and almost always because of time. Imagine this. You take two students, same age, same start date, same class, same curriculum. On day one, if you plotted their progress on a graph, the lines would start at the exact same point. No advantage, no deficit, just two kids learning the basics. For a while, those lines move almost together. Same slope, same direction. From the outside, it's hard to tell who's ahead. And this is the phase where parents tend to overreact because progress looks slow, flat, sometimes even stagnant. But what's really happening is foundation. Now, here's the part that matters. As time goes on, something subtle starts to happen. One student keeps showing up consistently. Training stays part of their routine. The other student starts missing. Not dramatically, not all at once, just a class here, a week there, maybe a break that turns into a habit. On the graph, this doesn't look dramatic at first. The lines are still close, but the slope begins to change. One line keeps moving steadily upward, the other flattens, pauses. Sometimes it can dip. This is what I mean by diverging trajectories. The separation isn't explosive, it's gradual, quiet, easy to miss in the short term, but undeniable over long periods of time. And this is why snapshots are so misleading. If you only look at one class, 1 month, 1 season, you miss the pattern because divergence doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself. Most of the separation parents worry about didn't happen last week. It happened slowly across dozens of small decisions, across months of showing up or not. This is also why early effort often feels unrewarding. The lines haven't separated yet, so it looks like nothing is happening. But under the surface, the trajectory is already being set. This is the uncomfortable truth about growth. You don't see the payoff when you want it. You see it when enough time has passed. And by the time it's obvious, the work has already been done. So when parents ask, when does the gap show up? The answer is simple, not early, later, and almost always because one path stayed consistent longer than the other. One of the biggest mistakes parents make when judging progress is expecting it to move in a straight line. Effort goes in, results come out. Nice and predictable. But that's not how real growth works. Growth is uneven, it's lumpy, it has long stretches where it feels like nothing is happening. And then moments where things suddenly click. Not because something magical happened that day, but because enough work had quietly stacked underneath it. Early on, effort often looks unrewarded. Kids show up, they practice, they repeat the same basics, and from the outside, it can look flat. Parents wonder if it's working. Kids wonder if they're improving. This is where a lot of people get impatient. But this flat phase isn't wasted time. It's accumulation. Coordination is being built. Timing is being refined. Confidence is slowly forming. None of it shows dramatically at first. This is how compound growth behaves. Small improvements stack. One repetition builds on the last. One class builds on the previous one. And over time, those small gains start amplifying each other. Here's the part most parents miss. The early phase of compound growth looks boring. It feels slow. It feels average. It feels like everyone is progressing at the same rate. But that's because the curve hasn't had enough time to bend yet. Once enough repetitions are layered, once movement patterns settle, once confidence and timing align, progress accelerates. Not suddenly, but noticeably. And when that happens, it looks like one kid just pulled ahead. In reality, they didn't jump, they compounded. The separation you see later is the result of hundreds of quiet moments early. Moments no one noticed. Moments that didn't feel impressive at the time. This is why consistency matters more than intensity. Intensity feels productive in the moment. Consistency changes the curve, and curves are what create separation over time. If you only look for progress that shows up quickly, you'll miss the kind that lasts. because durable growth hides before it reveals itself. Time matters. Simply showing up over a long period of time will move the needle. That alone creates improvement. But time by itself isn't what creates separation. What changes the slope is effort inside the time. This is where things often get misunderstood. Because when people hear effort, they think intensity, more hours, harder sessions, pushing until exhaustion. That's not what actually accelerates growth. Acceleration comes from quality, focused reps, intentional practice, paying attention to feedback, staying engaged instead of just going through the motions. Two kids can spend the same amount of time in class and come out with very different results. Here's why. One child is present. They listen, they apply the corrections, they make small adjustments. The other child is there physically, but mentally checked out. Both logged the same hour, but only one actually compounded it. This is why consistency plus quality beats intensity every time. Intensity feels productive. It feels impressive, but it's hard to sustain. Consistency with quality is quieter, but it bends the curve. Over time, those small differences inside each class start stacking. One extra correction applied, one moment of focus instead of distraction, one rep done with intention instead of autopilot. None of those moments stand out on their own, but together they change the trajectory. This is also why parents sometimes get confused. They see two kids training the same amount and assume progress should be identical, but the time might be equal. The quality inside it rarely is. Here's the reassuring part. This isn't about squeezing more out of your child. It's not about adding pressure. It's about understanding that presence matters, engagement matters, attention matters, and those things compound naturally when kids feel supported and consistent. Time keeps the line moving, quality changes the slope, and when both are present long enough, acceleration shows up. There's another part of this model that parents need to understand because it explains a lot of what they see later, and it often gets misunderstood. When training stops, growth doesn't slowly decline. It doesn't drift backward. It freezes. The line doesn't fall. It flattens. This isn't about punishment. It's not about consequences. It's not about saying someone did something wrong. It's simply how growth systems behave. When a child stops training, they stop layering reps. They stop refining movement. They stop receiving feedback. They stop adapting. And without new inputs, the system has nothing to compound. Meanwhile, the other kids keep showing up. Their line keeps moving, quietly, steadily, not dramatically, but consistently. At first, the difference still looks small. Parents might even think they'll catch up later. And sometimes they do. But here's the part most people miss. Catching up requires time. And while one child paused, the others didn't. This is why separation often feels sudden. It's not because growth suddenly exploded. It's because one line kept moving while the other stayed still. And once enough time has passed, the distance becomes obvious. This doesn't mean kids can't take breaks. Breaks are normal. We all need them. Life happens. Bodies need rest. Families need space. The issue isn't a pause. It's what happens after the pause. Does training resume? Does consistency return? Or does the pause quietly become the end of the line? This is where many parents underestimate the cost. Not emotionally, but mathematically. Because growth only compounds when you're in the system. Once you step out, compounding stops. Again, this isn't judgment, it's clarity. And clarity helps parents make calmer decisions. By this point, most parents can feel it. The model makes sense. The lines, the time, the compounding. So the question becomes, why does progress still feel so confusing? Because parents don't experience growth as a timeline. They experience it as moments. One class, one tournament, one kick, one bad night. And the human brain is very good at overreacting to moments. We compare snapshots, not trends. We look at who looked confident today, who executed cleanly this week, who seemed ahead in that moment. And we let those snapshots shape the story we tell ourselves. But snapshots lie. They're incomplete. They strip away context. They ignore momentum. And they exaggerate short-term differences. This is especially true early on, because early confidence is often mistaken for long-term capability. Some kids are naturally comfortable performing in front of others. Some are more expressive. Some are less affected by nerves. That shows up immediately, but it doesn't predict who will stay. We also tend to underestimate time. A month feels long, a season feels significant, but in the context of real development, those are very small windows. The system hasn't had enough time to reveal anything meaningful yet. Another reason progress gets misread is emotional proximity. You're close to your child. You see every struggle, every mistake, every hesitation. You don't see the quiet improvements because they don't stand out. They feel normal. Meanwhile, you notice other kids at their best. A clean moment, a confident round, a strong performance. And without meaning to, you compare your child's average to someone else's highlight. That comparison is never fair. This is where anxiety creeps back in. Not because your child is behind, but because the lens you're using is distorted. Understanding growth over time corrects that lens. It shifts you from reacting to moments to observing patterns. And once you start looking for patterns instead of snapshots, everything feels calmer. You stop asking, why aren't they there yet? And start asking, are they still moving forward? That question changes everything. When you step back and look at the full picture, something becomes very clear. The biggest advantage a child can have isn't talent. It isn't confidence. It isn't early success. It's staying. Kids who stay give time a chance to work. They allow reps to stack. They let effort compound. They stay long enough for the curve to bend. And that matters more than how impressive things look early on. This is where the long game quietly rewards families. Because while others chase fast results, the kids who stay are building something deeper. Movement patterns become automatic. Decision-making becomes calmer. Confidence becomes grounded. Not loud, not fragile, but steady. The long game also does something else. It removes panic. When parents understand that growth is unfolding over years, not weeks, they stop reacting to every dip. They stop micromanaging every moment. They stop feeling like something needs to be fixed immediately. Instead, they focus on what actually matters. Showing up, staying engaged, keeping training part of their life, letting identity form naturally. This is where real confidence comes from, not from being ahead, but from knowing you belong, from knowing you can handle hard days, from knowing you've stayed through discomfort before. Over time, kids who stay become very hard to separate from. Even if they didn't stand out early, even if they weren't the most confident at the start, even if progress felt slow at first, time evens things out. And then it starts to favor those who stayed. This is why the long game isn't passive. It's not doing nothing. It's choosing patience over pressure, consistency over intensity, perspective over panic. When families commit to the long game, they give their child something powerful: space to grow, room to struggle, time to compound. And that advantage lasts. If there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's this: most kids don't fall behind. They fall out of the system that allows growth to happen. Progress isn't about racing. It's not about being ahead early. And it's not about trying to force results before the foundation is ready. Real advantage is built quietly, through time, through consistency, through staying. When kids stay long enough, growth has room to work. Reps turn into skill. Effort turns into confidence. And discipline turns into identity. Not overnight, but inevitably. This is why patience matters. Not because growth is slow, but because growth is layered. Each class, each practice, each moment of focus adds to the structure underneath. From the outside, it can look unremarkable. From the inside, something powerful is forming. A child who knows how to show up. A child who knows how to stay with something hard. A child who trusts the process. So, if you ever find yourself worrying about where your child stands, zoom out, look at the line, ask a better question. Not, are they ahead, but are they still moving forward? Because the kids who pull ahead in the long run aren't special. They aren't perfect early. They didn't avoid struggle. They just stayed long enough for growth to show. If this episode helped you see training and progress differently, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And if you want more conversations like this about helping your kids grow through martial arts, join us in our school community. It's called Off the Mat. The link is below. I'll see you on the next one.